I have a small favor to ask that takes you literally a few seconds. If you like the first 100 podcasts and the guests that we have invited so far, can you do me a small favor and give us a thumbs up on any podcast platform that you are listening on? It helps the podcast more than you think, because the higher we go on the ranking, the more interesting guests we can invite. Thank you again for your support.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Broadcasting from around the world, you're listening to The First 100, a podcast on how founders acquired their first 100 paying customers. Here's your host, Hadi Radwan.
This podcast is sponsored by All-in-One, the premier fantasy sports site that is on a mission to bring all sports fantasy games under one roof. If you are into football, the Euro 2024 is coming soon. Head to www.allinone.rocks. That's www.allinone.rocks and register for free for the first predictor game. You can create free leagues, invite and compete with your friends, and show your prediction prowess. May the best team win. Good to have you on the show, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm great, bro. Good to be here. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for taking time to come on the pod. This is the first time we host professional football player, which is completely different than other guests, but we're very excited to share your story. Kevin Stuart is a professional football player who used to play with very notable teams like Tottenham Hotspurs, Liverpool and Blackpool. Kevin, take us back to the early youth days. How did you decide that the career of football player is for you?
Bro, because it's all I ever knew from a young kid. All my memories were literally me and my dad playing football, competing, sports, running football. And just every young kid watched every single match there was. You play it the minute you got home from school, you play it throughout school. It's all I ever knew. Like I never, ever imagined any other career path. I never imagined me doing anything else. So it was literally quite natural. It was just like, it was all just trying to find the path. What's the best path to take in order to get to the next level, to compete against better players in the country. So it was easy, natural. There was no other career or no plan B. I didn't think about anything else. So very natural to just try and get in and amongst and compete with as many good players as I possibly could for my age group. And that was it.
Amazing. You talk about playing with your dad. How important is family when it comes to setting up your career? How did they shape your football career?
It's everything, man, because I had a lot of friends who probably could have made it, but they didn't have the support. Because your parents have got to take you like 3-4 times a week after they've worked as well to training every day. And then when you're young, it's not every day. It's like 3-4 times a week. So it's like, what else are you able to do them other days? How well are you eating? Mindset-wise, mindset's huge. So what kind of environment are you in when you're at home? Is it a positive one? Is your dad a role model? Does he help you with your mindset? So family is so important. I definitely couldn't have done it without my dad for sure. One, because he trained me from a very early age. And two, just the support, taking me around, traveling places, forking out money that he didn't even have for me to go on tour, different countries to compete and play. And the petrol money just adds up. All that stuff adds up. Buying football boots and you're kicking a hole in it 2 weeks later and having to get another pair. So super tough. He made a lot of sacrifices, but he always made it work. So that's so important for a young kid, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people listening that their dream was to become a professional sports athlete in one form or way. What does it take to become really a professional football player? If you look back at your career, if you had a checklist or a playbook that you want to give to your kids and say, these are the steps necessary to become a football player, what would those be?
It's a tough question because that will change so many times at different stages of their lives. If we're talking from a very young age, so now, right, I have 2 boys who are obsessed with football. So there's a high chance that they're going to want to be footballers. So to answer your question, maybe almost in reverse, is what would I give to my kid now? What would I want my kids to have in order to ensure them to be the most successful when they're older? And right now, it's just to have the obsession with playing football. Like at any spare minute, they should they shouldn't have to, but to make them the most successful is if it's how regularly they play football now. How often are they playing? The more they play from a young age, because when you're young, even especially below 7, I'm probably sure you've heard this, is when that's the biggest learning phase of their life. That's where they get all their beliefs. That's where they learn the most. They're just a sponge, like complete sponge. I see it with my kids all the time. They're so easily influenced. Their memory is unbelievable. And you would say something like 3 weeks ago that you didn't even realize you said, and they pick it up and regurgitate it 3 weeks later, and you're like, how do you even remember that? So now it's just like, how much how much learning can I cram into them? How much repetition can I cram into them? And they've got to enjoy it as well, otherwise they're not going to do it. So I've had to be really clever. I've had to like use the power of storytelling in order to give them context about football, for them to like be in awe of football. Take them to the stadium. So I always took them to the stadiums with me when I was playing. So I just kind of installed stories into them about football and related it to them, related it to our lives, and then they just become obsessed with it. So I think I've done well so far to get them into an obsession state. And I'll say, when you're young, obsession. That's the main word that comes to mind, obsession. How much desire do you have to play the game? Because the more desire you have, the more you play it, the better you'll get, and the bigger of a head start you will have on the other kids that are only starting when they're 7, 8, 9. So from this point of the journey, I'd say that's the most important thing.
When you move up the journey and you become a professional football player, in that case, what differentiates the superstars from the stars? Because you have access to the same, probably coaches, team members, you have access to the same time, 24 hours. What makes that difference between the star and the superstar?
Going back to this, I do think that a lot of it does stem from childhood and a young age. So you can have a guy, a footballer, that learned so much when he was younger, and you can have another player that didn't learn as much. Maybe he started a bit later, or he didn't have as much repetition as the superstar. But his mindset, people think that some of the best footballers have the best mindset. Oh, it's not actually true. They're just very talented with good mindset. There's people with better mindsets than the superstars, but they're just more talented. They learn more. They had more repetition. Maybe they had less obstacles to overcome. So I don't you obviously have to have a strong mentality, but I don't think the superstars are the ones with the superior mindsets. I really don't. I've seen superstars and their mindsets, and I've seen players that haven't reached the top that actually have stronger mindsets. But maybe their journey was a lot tougher, and they had to overcome more obstacles. More obstacles got put in the way for them to be able to progress. I'd say the repetition and the obsession when they were younger to put them further ahead. And I would say their resilience to keep going, to keep training, to keep wanting to play, to be obsessed when they get home. We're talking Messi and Ronaldo. These guys have played hundreds of football matches. Like, people don't understand how hard that is to do just from an injury perspective. Like, these guys are never injured. So for them, the amount they just invest in themselves, the obsession they have when they get home, they sleep, eat and breathe football. And they're always thinking about their next performance, their next training session, their next game. So they invest into themselves to make sure they're right for their next game. So that's the main thing. Obsession just always rings in my mind when we're having these kind of conversations, because it's just a level of obsession.
You talk about something that we could transition into your coaching business. You're helping people become fitter, healthier. And you talked about like these superstars like Messi and Ronaldo. They've invested a lot, not only in building their skill set, but also managing what food they eat, how often they sleep, and all of these factors that people who are not athletes, they're sitting behind the desk, they avoid completely, because they said, hey, we're not an athlete. We don't need to invest that much time in health. What's your thought process on this? And talk us why you've left the professional football and came into the coaching world.
Yeah, well, to answer the first question, I think that is absolutely wrong, because I see everybody, and everybody should see themselves as athletes, because everybody has to perform at their best every single day, whether it's parenting, whether it's their work, whether it's their relationships, their marriage. All of those things require so much energy. So you have to be at your best. You wouldn't smoke, you wouldn't drink the day before competing. If you was running a marathon, you would prepare like you're about to run a marathon. But I don't understand why people don't do this every day, because every day is like a marathon. You have to be at your best every single day. So why do you not see yourself as an athlete? I call people everyday athletes because they should treat themselves as athletes. because all the things they do require energy. They require you to be at your best mentally and physically. I've had harder days at home with my kids than I've had at training. Like sometimes that's physically and mentally more draining than training. So that's why like I cut drinking out a long time ago, because I can't fathom me drinking with a hangover and then parenting the next day. It's like impossible. Just like it's almost impossible to drink and then go play a match the next day. It's the same. So I think everybody needs to see themselves as athletes. That's what I try and get over to people. And you only get everybody wants the fitness and the health of athletes, but you only get that when you view yourself as an athlete and treat yourself as an athlete. So if you really want that, you really desire more energy, you really desire to be fitter, then treat yourself like an athlete. Now, this doesn't mean training to the extent of an athlete, but it just means using the same principles as an athlete. Eat clean, eat how we eat. Don't do these extreme diets, these keto diets, all these crazy stuff, and fasting is good for you, but just these extreme diets that don't even work. And they see people online that use these diets and they aren't even that fit. They're not even capable of that much. So just replicate what a pro athlete would do. And we don't have extreme diets. We eat a balanced diet consistently every single day. So this is what I try and install into people and try and get people to think about. And that's what get people the health that they're after. It's really not that complicated. And the second question of what was it, why I came out of pro football?
Yeah, how does the transition from a football player to a business owner?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And like I said, I don't feel like I've fully transitioned out of football yet, but I've pretty much done it as if I was. It was a bit slower, actually, because when I was 25, I've really started immersing myself in business while I was playing. Like I got really invested into business. I was networking like crazy. I started getting involved in property. I've done some really big, really large property developments. I've built like 48 apartments from the ground up. And then after that, I've done 107 beds from the ground up. So I was involved. I was heavily involved. I strategized it really well. I had partners who was doing like majority of the legwork. And this just came out of curiosity. It came out of knowing how fragile sport is and how financially exposed athletes can be. So I had a real urge to kind of put something in place. And I did that really well over a really short period of time. So I started hanging around with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, a lot of property developers, property investors. And I just caught the bug for it. And I started learning a lot. And this is one thing I was telling you about Messi and Ronaldo, about how they invest in themselves. Sometimes people get a little bit lucky with who they have around them in terms of agents, family members, coaches. They would have been taught about business within football a lot earlier, maybe just because of how good they were. So they got surrounded by those people. Not a lot of athletes treat themselves as a business, where they absolutely should. And if I knew what I knew now, the longevity of my career, the injuries that I had, I would have went a lot higher if I understood the business behind the athletes, of how to invest in yourself, how to even reclaim tax back on the things that you spent on yourself, which footballers don't even know. You'd be surprised, but they don't even know this. So I was around a lot of business and I started learning about this a little bit. It's never too late, but I started learning it a lot later than I would have liked. So I also started having a lot of injuries around this time. So the business side started becoming more relevant to me. So I started learning more and more. And then coaching came about just because I've always been someone who's always been very invested in self-development. Like that's how I've got through my career. That's how I've always got to where I've got to. That's how I've surpassed people that are a lot more talented than me. And I've done that throughout self-developing everybody else. And that's me paying for coaches, trying to overcome my fears, my self-limiting beliefs, my doubts, all the pressure and intensity that comes with playing professional football, playing in front of 90,000 people. You got to self-develop. So my life was changed by a lot of coaches. So I always had the desire in me to coach other people, what I've learned. So I always knew, I got to a point when I was about maybe at 27, where I knew my next exit for football, I was going to be a coach of some sort. Coach around self-development, coach around fitness, something that's going to change other people's lives, because I got so good at that. I believe I have self-mastery. No one's ever going to have 100% self-mastery, but I have self-mastery. I can almost feel like I can do or bend my mind to do whatever I want to do. And that's very powerful for me. So I want to teach people the same. So I actually started coaching people for free for a little while I was playing, because I wanted to just get a taste of it. So I did that. I really enjoyed it. Even in that short period of time, I helped a lot of people. A lot of people close to me came out about really personal things. So I'm like, this is my purpose. I'm supposed to do this. So it came about a lot sooner than I imagined. I thought I was going to do this when I was like 35, 36, but I'm doing it now when I'm 30. So that's how it came about.
What has been the hardest part or the most challenging part of finding leads or clients that would come and trust your process?
I think it's hard. It's weird, and I think about this a lot. But I think you'd think as a professional athlete or professional footballer that going into a fitness coaching program and having a fitness coaching business would start off very easy. But I think it's actually been the opposite. I think it's hard for people to trust me as something else other than a footballer, even though it's fitness related. But like you're parting with hundreds or thousands of pounds to someone who you've just watched never be on camera. You just watched that post pictures of him playing, and you know him as a footballer. People put footballers in like another planet, like they're not even in the real world. They feel like we don't have the same problems as humans. We're just so unrelatable. So when we're coming to something like coaching, which is a very personal thing, it's very hard for someone to trust you. Now, in the long run, once I gain the trust of people and I become more relatable and I share my story more and they understand, okay, like he's been through what I've been through, but just it's actually a lot more relatable than I thought. Then in the long run, the professional football thing will become a trust factor and will become a powerful thing. Right now, it's the opposite. So for me, it's about getting a new audience, people that don't know me as a professional footballer as much, and they just see the background of professional football and they see the new me now that's like doing podcasts, that's speaking. That's where my leads and clients are going to come from. And the ones that I do have now are more the entrepreneurs that know me and they know my mindset. They know how driven I am. They know my competence around mindset, around fitness. They're the initial people that I've had that trust me to deliver that for them. And the people, that are kind of on the outside looking in, they're not going to trust me from the very beginning. So it's a process, but it's a fun process.
So you've played with Tottenham, Liverpool. What is the difference between the culture of both teams, and what have you learned from each one separately that you're bringing into your business?
Culture-wise, there wasn't much difference from Spurs to Liverpool. They're very similar clubs. Liverpool's a bigger club, probably a lot more like family orientated. At Liverpool, it feels more like a family and a community. But in terms of culture, I would say standards. Standards is one of the main things that stand out. It's like it's got a bit of like militancy to it, where you eat this, like there's no ketchup on the tables, there's no sugar in the building. It's just like we want to be the best, so we take the smallest percentages because we're competing against other teams that are all doing the same thing, that all have money to all buy players. Everyone's got the same level of players. It's like everyone's trying to find this extra percentage from somewhere. So it's very detailed. And once you start getting higher up in football, it's a lot more marginal. Like the things that make people better than another player is marginal. Everybody can shoot the same. Everybody has the same physical attributes, but it's very marginal things. So that's probably the main thing I've been to business. And I'm very excited to start building a team, which I'm not there yet, but I'm very excited to start building a team, start hiring a number of people so I can create that. Because I know I've been at Spurs and Liverpool, I've been there when they've had bad times. And the culture, the difference in culture, the difference in atmosphere around the place when things are going well and things are not going well is day and night. So it's like, I know what a culture looks like when we're losing every single week and we're in the shit. And I know what the culture and the mood is like when we're winning every single week. And they're two different things. The players have two different behaviors. When we're winning, people stay for longer. People go in the ice bath. People eat well. People stay and talk. People socialize. When things aren't going well, people are coming in late. People are leaving early. People are taking shortcuts. So I've learned a lot about the mood and the atmosphere and the standards that you need to have in order to be successful. And I know what it looks like and I've been in relegation battles where we're losing every single week. Everyone's blaming each other. There's a huge blame culture. It's no one's fault. There's one group talking about another group. The manager's saying something. And then 10 minutes later, we're all having a meet about the manager saying how shit he is. So I know cultures. I know what's a good culture. I know what's a bad culture. I know what gets good results. I know what doesn't get good results. So that's something that I'm really interested to transfer into business. So it will be interesting for sure. But right now, there's only me and a few guys that are close to me that are building this. So even though I impose the standards on them, I'm looking forward to. There's only a few of us, so I'm looking forward to like having a bigger group of people. That will be really interesting.
Amazing. And from both clubs, which leadership skill have you seen that has really helped you in shaping how you want to do the business? Like maybe it could be a leadership skill from a teammate or leadership skill from a coach that really impressed you in how they do things.
Yeah, I would say with Jurgen Klopp, his superpower is getting people to do what he wants and instilling what he needs and what he knows works into players, like getting the best out of players. That's what he's good at. Like you'll have players that he was competing against Man City with fighting for the Premier League and fighting for the FA Cup and like almost doing the treble. And if you looked at the players on paper, they're like half the players of what Man City had. But he knows how to get the best out of everybody. You could give Jurgen Klopp a 6 out of 10 player and put him against someone who's a 9 out of 10 player, and he might outcompete the 9 out of 10 just because he knows how to get more out of him. And that's what I was talking about, the margins. So even making those small margins to bring that 6 out of 10 player up to a 9. So I think man management and understanding people on a personal level, knowing what triggers them, knowing what drives them, and then being able to use that to get the best out of them is something that I've definitely learned from Klopp and something that I would implement. And he was very ruthless with standards. When I was there, he came in after, so he was new, and I came up to the first team shortly after. So there was a lot of players around that he didn't bring in and that didn't fit his style of playing. Klopp is like, I don't know how much you watch football, but Klopp is like relentless. His fitness, his running, his intensity. And there was players that couldn't do that. And he was like, we would just dust them off out the door. See you later. He was very, and I hear a lot of business owners say like, hire slow, fire quick. So you've got to be quick to fire people. That's what he was like. He was very ruthless. Like, you don't fit, you can't do what I want to do. You're not willing to. Whether you're not willing to or you can't, same thing, out the door. And he'll bring in someone that can do it. So that's something that is very ruthless, but to get that culture that you want, I think it's got to be done.
How did you see that strategy work out in situations where the team is losing? Because if I'm today the coach or the CEO of the company and I'm taking a strategic approach to saying, hey, if those teams are not on board, I'm going to fire them. This is my strategy. And then you see that your team is losing. How do you build that confidence to continue implementing your strategy without saying, oh, maybe I'm the problem?
Yeah, good question, because this was a big problem for Liverpool. Around 2016, they were underachieving. Klopp came in, he made a difference, and it was exciting football, but he was still struggling. He weren't winning every week, and he weren't like competing at the top of the table. So there was a period where like the intensity around the place was like very hard. So they would have a starting team, their starting 11, and their main team, and they would play against the people like the reserves and the subs. And there was a period of time where the intensity and the fear and the pressure around the first team getting results was so strong. When we played against them in training, we would keep beating them because they were fearful about like things aren't working. They were fearful around making mistakes, the papers getting on their back the next day. Like the intensity was really sharp. I remember really clearly. A lot of people were playing with a lot of fear, and we were just battering them every time we played against them. We was beating them, and we was like, "Fuck, this ain't good." But I think what it is not allowing that negativity to build too far and trying to get a handle on it. So I realized at that point he would hold a lot of meetings. Like he would try and control the atmosphere rather than if all that was going on and the intensity was that strong and he left everyone to it for 3 days, it would just spiral out of control. That's when you start getting the groups going off on their own talking, but he would be very controlling. Like I remember that time that we'd never have days off. We'd be in all the time because he wanted to control everyone's beliefs, everyone's ways of thinking, rather than letting it just fucking go crazy, because then they've lost it. It's done. And that's what happens. That's what happens in relegation battles. Like the lid don't get put on and it just explodes and then you're just doomed. So yeah, when things got tough, he would knuckle down and he would try and control it as much as he could. And it worked. And he tried to make everyone patient. Like, guys, he would always take the pressure off of people. So he'd be like, look, if we fail, do this plan. If we fail, I'll go out to the interview and I'll say it was my fault. That he used to always say that. So he used to try and put a lot of people at ease. He tried and take the pressure off of them and put it on himself. And he tried to just get them to be patient. Look, just be patient. It will change. It will change. And it really did.
Amazing stories. Thank you for sharing this. Some quick fire questions. Who's the player that you've played against that surprised you the most?
That question surprised me the most. Who surprised me the most? I'd maybe say Coutinho. I did know his quality. Philip Coutinho. I did know his quality. I've watched him play. When I was at Spurs, I'd watch him play on TV. But when I played him in person, obviously I was quite surprised. Like I didn't have him down as the best player, but he was actually the best player. He was very clever. Now that's just the first person that came to my head. Maybe there's someone else. Do you know what it is? I think people underestimate how good players actually are. So like someone like Jordan Henderson, for example, he gets a lot of slack. He gets called an average player or a basic player. They don't understand how good someone actually is in person, like how good they are at doing the most basic things. They wouldn't believe it. But when you're watching it on TV, something so simple as like receiving it and passing it, it looks so simple on TV. But in real life, they don't understand that there's one guy coming from this way, there's one guy coming from this way, one guy coming from this way. Not only have you got to have the technical ability to do it, but you've also got to not be able to panic and control your emotions and be relaxed. And not only have you got to do that, but you've got to do that 10 times out of 10 times because it happens like 10 times on the pitch. So someone like Jordan Henderson surprised me because when you watch him on TV, he does look basic. He's like, you feel like you could do it. But then when you see him in person and you actually train with him on a daily basis, you realize how advanced these guys actually are. So there's that level of someone who you think is basic, and there's that level who you think is good, but he's actually amazing. So them two stand out.
Who is the most underrated player you played against?
I think I'd say Henderson. And now, because he makes more of an impact, I could think of probably someone more underrated, but it's quick fire, and that's the first person that comes to mind, so I'll just go with him. Is they don't understand the impact that he makes. So the fans will only watch what someone maybe does on the ball. They'll only watch the passes that they make, but they can't hear what people say. They're not aware of the leadership. They don't understand how much he organizes. They don't understand how much he controls the team morale. They don't understand how much he sets the pace on whether they're going to press, whether they're going to sit off. They don't hear this stuff. It's too loud. And on TV, you can't hear it. And they don't know how much a person like that drives the standards in training every single day. And the star player that they all look up to that scores 20 goals a season, that fucks around and he's lazy in training and he has to grab a hold of him and make sure he performs, they don't see that either. They only see the guy scoring the goals. But maybe without him, that guy don't score as many goals. So definitely players like that, players like him, players like Milner, who look basic, they offer a lot, like a lot. Like if the real people know, the real footballers know that if you had to play a final and you could have a really luxury player, like super talented, or like a Jordan Henderson or a Milner on your team, 9 out of 10 times, depending on the situation, you're picking them guys because you just know.
Very interesting.
And you know that if you want to go to war, you're going to choose these guys over some of the most guys that they hype up. That's the main difference.
Reminds me of Roy Keane from Manchester United, who's basic, but he is like the anchor in the middle, controlling everyone. And that's why he was the captain of the team. That makes a lot of sense. Didier Deschamps from France as well was like very basic player. He's not a Zidane, but he was like a very basic player. What was the hardest part of playing against Messi?
The hardest, it's funny because that day wasn't that hard. He was chilled. He was super chilled. It was a cup match, but it was a pre-season cup. And in pre-season, it's a bit unrealistic. Like you play back-to-back games. Like we played Barcelona, and then the next day we went to Germany and we played another match. Like that would never happen. So he was chilled and he wasn't really trying to do a lot. He was just going through the motions. I think the hardest thing about it would have been the fact that you're playing against Messi, and which isn't usually that much of a problem for me. The more hype it is around competition, the better I perform. When there's more on the line, when it's like someone exciting, I like that, prefer that. So to be honest, that day wasn't very hard. Like he just chilled. I just always just kept checking where he was because I knew they would always try and get the ball to him. So I was always trying to block the passing lanes, and I was trying to dispossess him whenever I could because I just want to dispossess Messi. And he nutmegged me as well, actually, to be fair. So that was probably the hardest part. But yeah, it wasn't that challenging as it would if we played a Champions League match against him. So very different.
What do you think is the secret of his longevity when it comes to not being injured and healthy? Because he's not a big guy. He runs very fast. He's always in contact. And is there anything that you could take and offer to your clients from that perspective?
I don't know. It's strange. And I sometimes refrain from saying this because I don't ever want to undo the work that I know he would have done. But I can't not say that a lot of it is luck. Like he obviously would have prepared. He would have spent thousands of pounds, millions of pounds on his preparation, on his training. So like, I'm not taking that away. And that's a massive part. But for you to not just, then you can argue that he hasn't got certain injuries because he's trained so hard or he's been really strategic. But two things. One is a bit of luck. Like, I'm not going to lie. Someone could just tackle him, he's got no control over it, break his leg, and he doesn't play. And he's done for however long. So a part of that's luck. He's never had that. And the same for Ronaldo. They've had their injuries, but they've never had nothing crazy where they really struggled to come back from. And that's what happens. But also, I'd say it's actually easier for these players to stay injury free once they start hitting that level of where they are, because no one touches them in training. Like, no one dares tackle them, or you usually let them have it because you don't want to injure Messi or injure Ronaldo in training. So you let them have it. And Messi, like, because he's so good, he's not you don't rely on him to do the tackling. You don't rely on him to run like crazy. So he's very chill. Like, his physical stats will be very low. So the load on his body is low, where you've got players like me, where my whole game is like chasing around, doing the dirty work. It's tackling. I just pick up injuries so easily all the time. And I do like 12,000 meters of running every single game. So the load on my joints, the load on my body is a lot, where he's doing like half of the distance I'm doing because he's that good. And you don't want him running. You don't want him to be tired. You want him to have the most energy and just pick the ball up and go and do magic. So that makes it easier for them, for sure. So there's definitely different elements that all add into probably his longevity. But obviously you can't take away the work. You can't take away the amount that he will spend and the strategy that he has and the team that he would have built around him to make sure that he plays for as long as possible.
Kevin, this was an amazing episode. Thank you for sharing all your insights. What's next for you?
What's next for me is maybe a return to football in Dubai, maybe potentially. Let's see how it looks. And to grow the fitness business as big as I can, try and impact as many people as I can, try and change as many people's lives as I can through mindset and through fitness. Yeah, bro, just scale the business and just try and do amazing things, see how far I can take it.
We wish you the best of luck. We'll put all the things that you mentioned in the show notes. Hopefully we can have more of our listeners contact you for some coaching sessions, and we're here to help as much as we can. Thank you again for your illustrious career as well in football.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the First 100. We hope it inspired you in your journey. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify, and share it with a friend starting their entrepreneurship journey. Leave us a 5-star review. Your support will help spread our podcast to more viewers.